There's a very common expression that I particularly heard as a child when adults were attempting to let us know that either they have difficulty believing you or they realize that there's another side to a story. The expression is there are two sides to every story. And I'd like to share with you my side of this two-sided story. Thank you to the community development class and Professor Babarkis for allowing me to video document my book report from the book entitled Breaking Down Walls, a Model for Reconciliation in an Age of Racial Strife. I'm standing currently on the property of a devastating block. This home, no longer with windows, no longer with doors. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a mattress extended outside the window. This entire block of the 4700 block of Carter is indeed in miserable decay, but it wasn't always the case. Just like in breaking down walls, this block has been devastated by the voice and actions of racism. Yes, the very block in which I grew up in over 45 years ago is a block that from one point to another, you would not know it's in the same community. I grew up on the other side of the wall. Well, here's the other side of this wall of racism. This community in 1960 was filled of a mixed community of blacks and whites. When whites were residing here, this was a very prosperous area. There were beautiful homes, great landscaping, and even Mom has remembrances of families playing horseshoes and different games and backyard games along their backyard. Well, just like what we studied in community development and is noted in this book, Breaking Down Walls, we see that the devastation of racism causes whites to not want to be the minority. So as homes began to be developed on this block in which my parents bought a home, it was not the case or wanted that whites would be able to live with blacks. As a result, what does racism do? If you want to break down walls, please break down these walls. These walls look like someone came and put a bomb in my neighborhood. Please break down these walls, the walls that authors Washington and Kerner talk about having to commingle and to purposely and intentionally live together, work together, attend school together, etc. Please break down these walls, because these walls, I believe, that if once they've been broken down, can rebuild a community. Before I go into the principles that authors both Karen and Washington learned from the trial and error of their lives to urge Christians to racial reconciliation by these three biblical foundations. Number one, Christ made it a priority with Jews and Gentiles. Number two, the Apostle Paul made it a priority by extending beyond race, class, religion, and status. And finally, number three, our faith. It is the faith that I even have in my Lord Jesus Christ that causes us to be ambassadors for change. I'm now standing in an open and vacant lot, same block that I mentioned before, that the home that was once here, a four-family flat, is now gone. Well, in this very plot of land, wouldn't it be awesome that if the Lord did in fact send me back as a returner to this community, that he would allow a church to be planted in this very vacant spot, not only causing growth, not only causing hope, not only causing a restoration of some sort of change for good, but possibly returning our white brothers and sisters back to a community in which they once fled. It's very possible. And based on the 8 principles that the authors talk about, it is very hopeful in my spirit. And so those principles include things like intentionality. We have to intentionally move back to the area in which we once fled from for whatever reason, maybe for hope of a promise of a future, or hope for a better environment for our children. Certainly, when I left this community as a young person at the age of 19 and moved North County, I wasn't thinking about the fact that I've had a daughter and where she would go to school. But racism plays a part in her education as well as mine. The school she attended, completely to 95 percentile, was all black. The school in which I attended, currently even, is not a great mix of blacks to whites. There's always a seeming imbalance. And so I'm hopeful from using this intentionality purpose, as well as the other one being sacrifice, that we would realize as a Christendom, we must make a sacrifice. And if my sacrifice is to come back to where I once played kickball, rode my bike, and other fun events, then I could now come and bring hope and restoration to a very devastating environment.
With a view that's from my mother's backyard door of the devastation that I so intimately showed you earlier, my intentionality is what these writers of Breaking Down the Walls says. I'm committed to decide, and I must learn the other culture. I must learn the beliefs, the habits, to contribute to the spiritual, social, and emotional growth that God has intended for each of us. It would be helpful that if these young black girls and boys would be able to interact with young white, young Hispanic, young Asian girls and boys, so that their perspective will not be as one-sided as mine had been until the age of 18. Whites didn't leave because the blacks were not working or were on subsidized housing, as these were all hard-working, good stewards over their money and their credit, and able to live in newer homes. Did the whites leave because of what Karen says? Whites don't like being the minority. Ironically or sadly, both only are this community that has been remained undefiled is the block in which I grew up. Now tell me, how is it that the devastation of that empty lot and empty homes can just 15 to 25 feet away allow for a house that has the luxury, the blessedness, and the benefit, and even though it's closed for the season, of an in-ground swimming pool? The breaking down the walls must begin, and I believe it must begin with me. God bless you, and may this encourage you as well in your communities and in your neighborhoods to break down the walls of racism, to break down the walls of oppression, and to work together, one with the other, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and all races of people, just like Jesus. Thank you.